The day my mother-in-law showed up at my front door with 4 of her daughters, 2 rented moving trucks, and a stack of cardboard boxes, I didn't say a single word. I just stepped aside and let her in. She looked at me like I was already gone, like I was a ghost standing in a house that no longer belonged to me, and she smiled. Lord, did she smile. She said, "Baby, don't take this personal. This was always a family home, and well, you were never really family." I nodded. I went to the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water, and I watched through the doorway as she started telling her daughters what to take first. Now, before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the call I made that morning, about the document I had been holding on to for 2 years, about the moment her face went from triumph to absolute devastation, I need to take you back. Because none of this makes sense unless you understand who Diane Carter is, and more importantly, who she thought I was. My name is Keisha Renee Monroe. Well, Keisha Renee Carter now, though after everything I'm about to tell you, I've been thinking hard about that. I met Marcus Carter at a company conference in Atlanta 8 years ago. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and made it feel smaller, not because he was loud, not because he was arrogant, but because he had this quiet confidence that made everyone else seem a little less certain of themselves. He was handsome, he was driven, he had a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, and on our 3rd date, he showed me both of them on a yellow legal pad like it was the most normal thing in the world. I was 29. I had my own career in finance, I had my own savings, my own apartment in Buckhead. I didn't need Marcus Carter, but I wanted him, and that felt like the best reason to say yes. We dated for 2 years. Got engaged on a Sunday morning at his mama's house, which should have been my first sign, honestly, because the engagement wasn't just between me and Marcus. The way Diane Carter acted that morning, you would have thought she was the one getting the ring. She cried, she held my hands, she said, "Welcome to the family, baby," and I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. The Carters were a big family. Diane and her late husband Raymond had 6 kids. Marcus was the only son, the youngest, and the most successful. He had 4 sisters, Vanessa, Tanya, LaShonda, and Brenda. And then there was the 5th sister, Rochelle, who nobody talked much about because she'd moved to Portland and went a different way. Their words, not mine. From the outside, the Carter family looked like a picture. Sunday dinners, family reunions every 4th of July, matching outfits at Christmas. The kind of Black family that put their business in order and kept it together no matter what. But I had been around enough families to know that the ones who performed unity the hardest were usually the ones holding the most fractures underneath. The cracks started showing on our wedding day. Diane had opinions about everything. The venue, too modern. The flowers, too white. The food, too fancy, not enough soul. She wanted a church ceremony. We wanted something outdoors. She wanted her cousin's gospel choir. I wanted the string quartet I had been dreaming of since I was 12 years old. Marcus handled it the way Marcus handled everything with his family. He smoothed it over. He found the middle ground. He kept the peace. And I told myself that was a good thing. I told myself that a man who loved his family that deeply would love his wife even deeper. I was wrong about that, but it took me 5 years to understand exactly how wrong. The first 2 years of our marriage were good. Not perfect, nothing is, but good. We bought a house in Stone Mountain, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a backyard big enough for the children we talked about having someday. I put 30% down. Marcus handled the rest of the mortgage. We had an agreement, a partnership. That was what I thought we had. The shift was slow, so slow I almost didn't notice it at first. It started with Sunday dinners becoming mandatory. Then it was Marcus volunteering our house for every family gathering without asking me. Then it was his sisters calling at all hours, needing money, needing advice, needing a place to stay, and Marcus never said no. Not once. Vanessa stayed with us for 3 months after her second divorce. Tanya's car note got paid out of our joint account twice. LaShonda's kids spent half the summer in our house 2 years in a row because family helps family, and who was I to say otherwise? I said otherwise, quietly at first, in our bedroom behind a closed door. I said, "Marcus, this is our home. We need boundaries." And Marcus would look at me with those eyes, those same eyes that had shown me the 5-year plan on a yellow legal pad, and he would say, "Keisha, they're my family. I can't turn my back on my family." As if I was asking him to. As if setting a limit was the same as abandonment. And slowly, so slowly, I started to understand something. Marcus Carter did not see a partner when he looked at me. He saw a support system, a resource, someone who was there to make his life easier, not to share it. The beginning of the end started on a Tuesday in March, 3 years into our marriage, when Marcus came home and told me his mother was moving in. Not asking, telling. He said Diane's apartment lease was up and she couldn't afford the renewal. Her fixed income wasn't keeping up with Atlanta rent, and he wasn't going to let his mother struggle. He had already offered her the guest room. He had already told her yes. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after he said that, and then I said very carefully, "Marcus, you should have talked to me first." He said, "It's my mother, Keisha." And I said, "And this is my home." He looked at me like I had said something in a foreign language, like the concept of my home was something he had never considered, like the 30% down payment I had written from my own savings account had somehow already been forgotten. Diane moved in that Saturday. She was pleasant enough at first. She cooked, she cleaned, she stayed out of our space. But within 60 days, she had rearranged my kitchen, started making comments about how I kept the house, and begun referring to it, casually, almost accidentally, as our home. Our home. Not my home, not Marcus and Keisha's home. Ours. It was during Diane's 3rd month living with us that I did something I had never told Marcus about, something I had been quietly considering for almost a year before that. I went to see an attorney. Not a divorce attorney, not yet, a real estate attorney, because I had been doing my research and I needed to understand something very clearly. When we bought the house, Marcus and I were both on the deed, joint tenancy, which meant we each owned half, but it also meant that if anything ever happened to the marriage, things could get complicated. What I discovered in that attorney's office changed everything. Marcus had refinanced the house 18 months earlier, without telling me. He said it was to get a better rate. What he didn't tell me was that in the refinancing paperwork, he had quietly shifted the deed structure. My name was still on it, but the way it was structured now, his family trust had an interest stake, a trust that Diane Carter controlled. I sat in that attorney's office and read those documents 3 times, and then I asked the attorney to explain it to me slowly because I needed to be absolutely sure I was understanding what I was reading. I was understanding it correctly. My husband had used our home, the home I had put 30% of my own savings into, as a mechanism to give his mother a legal foothold. I drove home that afternoon and I did not say a word. I hugged Marcus when he got home from work. I made dinner. I asked him about his day. And that night, after he fell asleep, I started making my own plans. Over the next 6 months, I did what I should have done years earlier. I opened a separate bank account at a different institution, one Marcus didn't know about. I began transferring a portion of my direct deposit there every month. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would raise flags, just steady, quiet, intentional saving. I also went back to that real estate attorney. We went through the documents again, and she helped me understand something that Diane Carter, with all her confidence and all her certainty, had apparently never thought to check. The family trust had an interest stake, yes, but the deed itself, the primary deed that had existed before the refinancing, the one that was recorded at the county courthouse on the day we closed on this house, that deed had something in it that the refinancing paperwork had failed to properly supersede. A clause, a small, easily overlooked clause that my attorney had identified immediately. The house was mine, not half mine, mine. Not because I had done anything underhanded, not because I had manipulated anyone, but because when Marcus had rushed that refinancing through without consulting me, without even telling me the full scope of what he was doing, he had made an error. His attorney had made an error. And that error had left the original deed, the one with my name as primary owner, intact. I had a document that said so, signed, sealed, filed at the DeKalb County Courthouse. I put that document in a safety deposit box at a bank across town, and I waited. The breaking point came on a Friday evening in November. I had come home from work to find Vanessa, Tanya, and LaShonda all sitting in my living room. Nobody had told me they were coming. Diane was in the kitchen cooking like she owned the place, which in her mind I suppose she did. Marcus was sitting there looking at his phone like none of this was unusual. I said, calmly, "Marcus, can I talk to you for a minute?" He said, "In a little bit, babe. We're about to eat." We're about to eat. I walked upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed, and I thought about the woman I was when I met Marcus Carter at that conference in Atlanta, the woman with the career and the savings and the apartment in Buckhead, the woman who didn't need anyone but had chosen him anyway. I thought about what she would say if she could see me now, sitting on the edge of a bed in a house full of people who had never respected her, waiting to be invited to dinner in her own home. I picked up my phone. I called my attorney. I left a voicemail. I said, "I'm ready." My attorney had been very clear with me. We needed to wait for the right moment. Filing papers while Marcus was in the house would create a scene, and scenes could complicate proceedings. We needed him gone. The opportunity came 6 weeks later when Marcus was scheduled for a 4-day business trip to Houston. He kissed me goodbye on a Thursday morning, told me he loved me, said he'd call when he landed. I told him to have a safe flight. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, and then I went inside and I called my attorney and I said, "He's gone. How do we do this?" She walked me through everything. The filing had already been prepared. By Friday afternoon, the paperwork was submitted. By Saturday morning, I had a copy of everything in my hands. What I did not anticipate was Diane. Somehow, and to this day I don't know if Marcus called her, if she had some instinct, if one of the sisters had seen something. Somehow, Diane Carter knew something was happening, and she moved first. It was Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning when I heard the vehicles pull up. I looked out the front window and I saw Diane's silver Buick, Vanessa's Jeep, and a white moving truck, the kind you rent by the day from the place on Covington Highway. I watched them get out. I watched Diane open the trunk of her car and take out a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. I watched her daughters follow her up the front walk. And I opened the door before they could knock. Diane looked at me with that smile she had been practicing for years, I think, the one that was supposed to look like warmth but felt like a verdict. She said, "Baby, don't take this personal. This was always a family home, and you, well, you were never really family." I stepped aside. I let them in. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I could hear them moving through the house, Diane calling out instructions, Vanessa asking about the TV in the living room, Tanya saying she wanted the dining room set, LaShonda going upstairs. I sipped my water. I checked my phone. I had 2 text messages from my attorney confirming that everything was in order, and 1 missed call from Marcus. I did not call him back. At 10:45, I stepped into the hallway and I made a phone call of my own, not to my attorney this time, to the non-emergency line for the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. I explained the situation calmly. I told them that several individuals had entered my property and were removing items without my consent. I gave them my name. I gave them the address. I told them I had documentation establishing my ownership of the property, and I would have it available when they arrived. The deputy arrived in 22 minutes. I met him at the door. I handed him the documents my attorney had prepared, the deed, the filing, the certified copies of everything. He reviewed them. He asked me a few questions, and then he walked inside. I followed him into the living room, where Diane was supervising Vanessa wrapping the artwork off the walls. The deputy said, "Ma'am, I need everyone to stop what they're doing." Diane turned around, and for the first time in all the years I had known her, she didn't have anything to say. The deputy explained to Diane that the property was legally registered to me as primary owner, that a filing had been submitted to the court regarding the marriage, and that the removal of any items from the property without documented joint ownership could constitute theft. Diane said, "That can't be right. Marcus's name is on this house." The deputy said, "Ma'am, his name is on the mortgage. Her name is on the deed." Diane looked at me, and I watched something happen on her face that I had never seen before. The smile was gone. The certainty was gone. All the years of looking at me like I was temporary, like I was a placeholder, a guest in my own marriage, all of it dissolved in about 4 seconds. She said, "Keisha." Just my name, nothing after it. I said, "You should probably start putting things back." Marcus called 11 times between 10 and noon that Saturday. I let them all go to voicemail. His 12th call came at 12:17. I picked up. He already knew. Diane had called him. His sisters had called him. He was at the airport in Houston trying to get on a standby flight back to Atlanta. He said, "Keisha, what did you do?" And I want you to notice something about that question. Not what happened, not are you okay, not I'm so sorry my mother showed up at our house with a moving truck. What did you do? I said, "I protected myself, Marcus. That's all I did." He said, "You called the police on my family." I said, "Your family came to my house to take my property." Yes, I did. There was a long silence, and then he said something I will never forget. He said, "I never thought you were capable of this." And I said, "I know. That's exactly why I was." I hung up. After the deputy left and Diane and her daughters drove away in that rented moving truck with nothing in it, nothing, I walked through my house slowly. The artwork was still on the walls. The dining room set was still in the dining room. Everything was exactly where it had always been. I went upstairs, to the closet in the guest room, the room that had been Diane's for almost a year, and I pulled out the box I had placed there 3 months earlier. Inside was a folder. Inside the folder was a copy of every financial document, every deed, every bank statement, every piece of paper that mattered. And tucked in the back, behind everything else, was a photograph. It was from our wedding day, Marcus and me on the steps of the venue, just after the ceremony. He was looking at the camera, I was looking at him. I looked at that photo for a long time, and then I put it back in the folder. Because even at the end of something, you don't throw away who you used to be. You just stop building your future around someone who was never building it with you. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Marcus contested very little, partly because his attorney told him he had limited standing on the property, and partly, I think, because somewhere underneath all of it, Marcus Carter knew what he had done. He had chosen his family over his marriage every single time, and I had finally stopped asking him to choose differently. Diane never spoke to me again after that Saturday. Vanessa sent me a long text message that I read once and deleted. Washonda posted something vague on Facebook that her cousins apparently understood was about me. I didn't respond to any of it. I had nothing to prove to any of them. I want to say something to anyone who is listening to this right now and recognizing something in Keisha's story. Not the specifics, not the deed, not the moving truck, not the family trust, but that feeling, that slow, quiet feeling of watching yourself become smaller inside a life that was supposed to be yours. Here is what I want you to hear. The moment you start hiding things to protect yourself, your savings, your documents, your plans, that is not you being sneaky. That is not you being calculating. That is your instincts doing what instincts are designed to do. Protect the life you built. Keisha did nothing wrong. She asked for respect and didn't get it. She asked for partnership and got a performance. So she stopped asking and started preparing. And when the moment came, she was ready. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who has been underestimated finally showing her hand. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel seen, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe to Zuri Chronicles, because every week we tell another story, another truth, another woman who refused to disappear. My name is Zuri, and I'll see you next time.